Hello, and welcome to another wonderful episode of Submitted for Your Approval, the weekly card review show for Collective, the community-created card game where you make the cards. I'm Stranger Side, and this is a different room in my house. Grief, something happened. He has to be away for today. However, we are joined by my co-host, your co-host now, Empty Folder.
Hello, everyone.
And we have a special guest with us today, the Realm admin for Osagarth. And the guy who's trying really hard to get stock to work, Mystic, say hi.
Hi.
MysticSquire, Mystic, whatever. Squire, can I call you Squire? No.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump straight into the accepted submissions. Starting with the Lizathep Challenger is a 3-drop spirit, 2/3 undead Lizathep from Mirage with Duelist, and your undead have Slayer plus 1 EXP. So we've been doing this really cool competition here. It's submitted for your approval, but meanwhile, the AC was doing the mid-range undead AC. And it was actually just as much of a success as our competition was. We each got 3 cards in a piece. And I think this was probably one of the more interesting ones that did get in. We didn't get to pushed, worrisome lawyer. Grease resubbing, we'll see if it gets in this week. But we did get this fella, and I wanted to talk about him. So what this can do is this encourages, I like this, especially the thing that comes to mind for me at least is not necessarily Hawkins, but possibly maybe Baluk or something like that, because if you can get off a couple, like, this makes things more scary to block. The only problem with running into Baluk is I think if they lose the ability, if they die, they lose the ability, and you might not get to Slayer proc, but that's something I just have to sit there and test in the engine. Anyways, what do you think of this, Empty?
Yeah, so this is part of the XP undead package that we've been seeing from Mirage. It's very interesting because it pulls Bullock in this new direction where you're rushing your level 3, which I think is very interesting. Also, if we do get some truly massive, really high cost undead, you could try and do a Hawkins level 3 rush deck, which would also be really cool. So I like that there's an archetype that's actually playing around with XP again, because that's kind of been missing from Collective. So yeah, I like this card. I think it fits well into that deck.
What do you think, Mystic?
Okay, so basically, when the cards first got in, I went and I actually did play them. And yes, unfortunately, that's the case where if the unit dies, it doesn't gain the EXP. There is one simple fix, though, that can be applied, and that's basically just to apply the Slayer ability in all zones. And then,
yeah, it needs the word everywhere here. That might be worth an update slot.
Yeah, because as this card is, it's basically unplayable, since Undead's entire strategy is I'm going to throw 20 minions at you every turn and then just raise them all from the dead next turn.
Yeah, your stuff needs to be able to die.
Yeah, that is pretty rough. Until that gets fixed, there's no way this is going to see a play. That interaction just works out too poorly for Undead.
Well, yeah, because even any other more mid-rangey deck that wants to do this, you need to be able to get that actual proc. The ability needs to actually do something. And a lot of the times when you're killing something, you can get killed in the process. The Masked Prophet is a 6-drop spirit 5/5 Daling Arcanist from Swiatlo with Life Bond, Ward, Fast, end of turn, deal 3 damage to your opponent if they control less units than you, or 6 if they have none. And non-spirit actions cost 1 more. So this is sort of a this is a very interesting Punisher card that really hoses down on boardless decks, and of course it already has ward, so it's fairly well protected against them as well. You could also slip this in with the fast to just get that whole shield up where you have slowing down your opponent's game plan unless you're in the mirror. This has a lot. They're very toolboxy, but at the same time, it definitely does have this very clear direction of use the damage and the life bond to build up your life total, and forces people to play fair collective, where they actually have to have boots on the ground. Mystic, what do you think of this?
So I find it very interesting that it says non-spirit actions. That's kind of like a first of its kind. I don't believe any other design we have does that.
Yeah.
The only thing I would caution when it comes to designs like this, where it says non-spirit actions or like none of my affinity actions or some kind of card, is that mirror matchups with cards like this tend to be really like a slog, due to the fact that it's like you're buffing yourself, but you're also buffing your opponent. So neither of you really get ahead ever.
Well, it's not even buffing here. It's not debuffing, which is different.
Yeah, so I suppose something like this is fine. It's just, it seems a little awkward when it comes to designs like this, since it's very situational whether or not it's good.
Yeah, well, the thought with this is, so normally when you see like color hosing in, say, like Magic, it tends to have a place more either due by benefit of the sideboard, if there's a meta deck you can tech against, or it has a different benefit sometimes in terms of like a limited format, when you can reasonably expect that you're encountering people with a wide diversity of decks. Here, we're in neither of those camps, and so it's a little dubious as to how much that is mileage that is going to get out of that. One interesting thought, though, is what this does do is this hoses shifter decks, because we've been seeing a lot more, or at least I've encountered or heard about a lot of 2 affinity decks, and so you have a much better chance of this actually hosing something. Empty, what do you think?
Yeah, I think in the current meta that this is like slated to be very strong, since it's one of the few cards that is always going to at least go even mana-wise with your opponent if they're playing action spam. Just because like the ward and the body with more expensive actions is so hard to deal with. I do agree with Mystic. I think the idea of like specific affinity hosing effects is somewhat problematic. But on this card specifically, I think it just doesn't matter because spirit action decks aren't really a thing. So there's not really any deck that this isn't going to be hosing if they're playing an action heavy deck.
Yeah.
Also, Chroma unfortunately kind of gets caught in the crossfire with this card.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. So yeah, this hoses down on that as well. So let's talk about our competition, the submitted for your approval collective card collaboration competition. There's 4 C's in there somewhere. With Portside Abductor is a 4-drop mine 3/3 Duskling Pirate from Sweet Outlaw. With Agile and Summon, steal a unit until end of turn. It gets Ambush. This was made for Super Sun's prompt for a Nightling Pirate that has a steal effect, or a Duskling Pirate that has a steal effect, and it was arted up by Go Chris 10, who actually got all 3 of the Quad C designs in this last week. It's super cute. Obviously, I love the style. I do think it's interesting that it appears to be like artistically like Go Chris was like copying Super Sun's style, because it almost looks like Super Sun drew it. But of course it still does have some of the Go Chris like hallmarks, and then even like a reference to Plopka's art in the background there. So interesting stuff this does. Even if you aren't in a position where you're going to block with the unit that gets ambush, or you don't have anything to like sack it, you could still use this because of the way steel works to reset stats. It's effectively a flicker. You can use this just to borrow one of their passives for a turn if the passive ends up helping you, or if it just them not having that passive ends up hurting them. Of course, it's also an Agile 3/3, so you could also just use it for the body and all that. So I think overall, it's really well-rounded and interesting. Obviously, a lot better if you're running other cards that let you capitalize on your theft, but I think it's good as is. Empty, what do you think?
I think this is like a perfect card. I love threaten effects. It's kind of weird that we haven't really seen any of them in Collective's history. So like this has been a long time overdue. Like perfect design.
Well, part of it's that our steel is a fake steel. But
Yeah, but it still works.
yeah.
We just need like if we have like access to better access to keywords, it might be good to keyword steal. I mean, I'm not like a huge fan of having like the extra cards for everything, but for steal and mind control effects, it
Yeah.
may be warranted because there's a lot of weird interactions that you're not going to know as a new player.
Mystic, what do you think of this?
I find this card very interesting. It's a high risk, high reward type card. Since it's a 4 mana that gets removed by Phaser Blast, which is 2 mana. If your like opponent just played a big card like Jamie, I guess, probably not the best example considering he's rotated, but let's just go with Jamie for now. You steal this, you get a Jamie power, and you've basically just countered their 7 mana card with your 4 mana card.
Mm-hmm.
However, this is still fairly balanced since it's 1 turn, and again, this can just be removed by a 2 mana or 3 mana card in exchange for your 4 mana card.
Well, yeah, but usually you're getting enough value out of that summon. I don't think it matters so much. My favorite corner case synergy with this is going to be stealing the unit and then playing About to Snap on an opponent's unit to force them to attack into this. But that's more of a magical Christmas land kind of or magical collective land kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess
Collective Christmas land.
I guess I mostly see this as a punishment card to like punish people for playing big drops.
Yeah. Cave Glad. Okay, let's get to the bulk of the show, which is the accepted or the active submissions. Starting with Cave Gladiator is a 3-drop neutral 3/4 dinosaur knight from Unguya. Apparently they have an ordained knighthood. With Strategist and Rage, gain +1 attack. This was a collaboration between Space Turtle, Unguya Realm Admin, and I was the prompt designer for this. I wanted to see a new unit keyword. Here's what Space came up with, and here's why I think this is genius. Strategist says when this attacks, you can also choose an enemy attacking unit to block. So this is kind of an equivalent to Vigilance, where you can both attack and block in the same go. It obviously has very interesting interactions with initiative, and because the way it has to be implemented, it's a little janky, but I think this is actually a really cool keyword, and I would be eager to see this actually be implemented or actually used more. This allows you to, this actually helps break stalls because you can both attack and block. There's less incentive to not attack, and could synergizes really well with a lot of existing keywords. Empty, what do you think of this?
I think this keyword is awesome. It like the edge case interactions with this, like and initiative, are really cool. And I always love when those happen in combat because it makes combat like very interesting. So like a puzzle that you have to solve. Uh, and this card in particular, obviously, is taking advantage of that with like the rage get +1 attack, so that like when it's attacking, if your opponent has initiative, their attacker will bonk into it first and make it bigger. Really interesting card. I hope Strategist takes off.
Yeah, I definitely think so. The reason I came up with this challenge originally was I wanted to come up with a new unit keyword, and I ended up doing so with Harmonize, which Harmonize has this very niche application that's not very, it doesn't mesh as well with the current keyword pool. And so I was really, really glad to see where what happened with this one. Mystic, what do you think?
I also really like strategist as a keyword. It seems like such a simple effect. It's one of those things where I go, wow, I can't believe we haven't thought of this before.
Yeah.
One thing I am concerned about Cave Gladiator in general is it looks very over curve. It's 1 stat point for being able to attack and block in the same turn, while also if it gets pinged, the damage goes up, and it's basically just maneuvering its stats around to be under curve so it can have the strategist. I think that it could probably be a 2/4 because of how versatile this card is in general, and it can attack, take damage, and then block and kill something.
I see that. I think it's about okay where it is, because strategist is, I mean, it's hard to use effectively, but of course, whenever you come up with a new unit keyword, it's hard to figure out where it's going to fit into the puzzle and how many points it's worth. Like, I know Harmonize, I used to think that was worth like 1.5 points, and really it is not worth as much as people think it is. So, I don't know.
I have a question about Harmonize. So what happens if like you strategist 2 units onto the same attacking unit, or one that you've already blocked?
I don't know. No, it just works with the regular blocker system. It's
So
not
you
going to cause
can't
any weirdness there.
you can't double choose or choose one you've already blocked? Is that how it works?
No, you can choose one you've already blocked, and it works like regular double blocks.
Oh,
Yeah.
it just adds them into the queue.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sick. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, it's actually been explored. There's one effect that used those blocks once before, but it's definitely not common enough for people to really know. So anyways, another great one from the Quad C competition is the Gathering Tree. Gathering Tree is a 3-drop neutral 0/3 plant placed from nowhere in particular. With can't attack, ambush, and summon, create the 3 roosters in order. Your chickens have ambush. This was designed for a prompt based around some cool art piece that Hanoi saw. I think it's on his like kitchen wall or something. Anyways, let's get to these chickens. Kiki the Wisdom. They're all 0/1 neutral 0 drops with can't attack. Kiki the Wisdom has your chickens have Entomb, draw a card. Cuckoo the Courage has your chickens have Entomb, gain 1 HP. And Coco the Power has your chickens have Entomb, Herald 1. Bear in mind, this does have to do kind of with, I'm going to guess that the Entomb would still work. Because they had it as they died, which is when that kind of thing's checked. So chickens have been in a weird spot. Someone always wanted to make them a deck, and it didn't really work out too well. And now we have this thing that could maybe revitalize them a little bit. Once you play Gathering Tree, depending on what order your things die in, you could draw up to 3 cards, gain up to 3 HP, and herald up to 3 times. But probably some combination of that like a 3-2-1 or something like that. But if you have other chickens, like say Chicken Tower, you can get some pretty insane value out of them. And so I really do love this Azur's design. I think it's beautiful, and I think it's very emblematic of what the competition has become. Mystic, what do you think?
So first of all, Kiki the Wisdom is very clearly better than the other 2. Gaining 1 HP is basically worthless.
It probably could have been 2 and 2, but they went for symmetric, yeah.
Yeah, I would have said that the gain 1 HP should have been gain 3, since that's kind of like the gain 3 archetype.
Yeah.
And then the Herald 1 is also, Herald is just very slow in general, which makes it not very good.
Especially if you're running chickens.
Yeah, especially if you're running chickens and they can't attack. That's so what they could have done is they could have it draw 1 card, Herald 2, and gain 3 HP.
Yeah.
Which would have gave it a nice ebb and flow of 1, 2, and 3. Other thoughts is that this could potentially generate a lot of value, but since the chickens are all 1 HP, it's likely fine.
Yeah.
And yeah, it would be interesting to see chickens take it towards self-sack, which is kind of what this looks like it's encouraging.
I mean, they do have ambush because of the tree, and so they could just serve as blockers, or just Yeah, I think this is sort of building up either a pillow fort style, like a self-stack style of gameplay. Empty, what do you think?
I mean, it's another one of these like board in a can or like these pack of 40 style cards.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think chickens will be a death. I think like the best chickens can hope for right now is being fodder for vampires. It's just sad, but they're just not a deck that seems designed with like the intent of winning. They just sort of sit around there and stall for time. Like chickens have never even come close to having a win condition.
Well, yeah, but so okay, talk to me about chickens vamps. Do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, is Chicken Tower still in standard?
No, chicken tower's out.
I don't think it is. Yeah, yeah, that's kind of the issue. They need a replacement for Chicken Tower. Because if you get this out and you have like some chickens to sack, you get very good value for doing so. Like you get cards, HP, and Herald, and this itself like gives you a lot of sack targets, and it also puts a threat with like Kiki the Wisdom, like drawing you a bunch of cards if your opponent doesn't deal with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's cool, but yeah, I do agree that if chickens are going to be a thing, they have a long way to go. The Nasty Gnomes are a 1-drop spirit 1/1 gnome curio from Carthian. They were actually submitted last week, but resubbed, and I really wanted people to give this card a second chance. It was at like 16 on the sub last week. It's like 7 now. And summon, create a copy of this, and entomb, draw a gnome, and put this on top of your deck. So, like, these guys are a mischievous array of blockers. It was a prompt designed by none other than Gummy Bears 95, who is my fiance, and executed quite skillfully by Asdrez with art to match. Man, the art's actually really pretty on this one. People really like this, and I just kind of want to know what happened. I want like a post-mortem on this, I guess. Empty, what do you think of this?
This is very strange. So it's like a replacement for a very important card in Lula that lets you like get your two 1/1s on turn one. The issue is that this can like soft lock you if you're not careful, because once you run out of gnomes to draw, like this is gonna keep putting itself on top of your deck, and you're going to be drawing into nothing but nasty gnomes. And it makes a copy of itself, so you'll have 6 gnomes to go through after all of these die.
Well, I mean, after a certain point, you can just stop playing them, right? Just use them to build up a board of either early blockers or early attackers, and then just sit on them.
Okay, so let's see. So you play the first one, and then when both the tokens die, like both of them go on top of your deck, and you draw your other 2 copies. But then you have 2 cards that you can't play now, because if you do play them and your opponent removes them, you have no gnomes left to draw. Well, I guess you have the ones on top of your deck, but then you're just cycling through gnomes forever.
You do have to be careful about them. I do agree that they can be mischief to you, but I think
like
it's an interesting interplay. And I mean, for being a 1-drop 2/2 with upside, the entomb serves as their potential downside. They do have a potential to muck with your draws, so that's kind of a balancing factor. And I think it's a really interesting one.
It is very interesting to think about. I do think it's kind of bad though.
Understood. Mystic, what do you think?
I really love this design. It's a risk reward type. It's like, oh, I play a bunch of gnomes, and then I basically have infinite 1-drops I can play. But then you also have to realize, oh, but if I just keep playing gnomes, eventually my opponent's going to like stabilize the board. Like if I'm just playing gnomes and then they play like a flambeau spell, they just hill a bunch, wipe my board, and now my hand is filled with gnomes. And I'm basically not drawing any real cards from my deck. So I'm not going to have any late game or any other thing besides Gnomes. And then your opponent, they just get something like Menace down the board, and then they basically win. Until they can stabilize the board in that way, however, I think this is a very powerful card in terms of a aggro versus aggro matchup or anything of the sort, just because this can make your board go so wide so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is better against aggro and maybe mid range than it is against control, since this is really easy for control to kill, and then you have no other cards in your hand to deal with anything else they have.
This does also have interesting synergy with notions of like, oh, maybe I just want like banish fodder from hand. Maybe I'm KM, and I'm okay with having extras or garbage or whatever. And I'm sure there's other things you could do with it if you get really creative. I know if you're running multicolor, you could door to elsewhere to avoid some of the problems with it, but you'd have to be in Spirit Splashing Mind. So I don't know.
Yeah, now that I think about it, like I agree with this. This is very strong in the aggro mirror because it's like infinite jump blockers.
Yeah. The Voided Horrors are a 1-drop neutral action from Black Rift with put a copy of a unit into your deck, hand, and graveyard. I obviously love this for reasons I don't really need to talk about. Excalibur Mech did a lot of interesting thinking with this. I do like how this references, so we had the recent Call the Worms get in from the quad seat competition, and we have these things now that just stick things directly in your graveyard waiting for you to do something with them. It does give you a copy in hand, and it gives you a copy also in your deck for you to potentially draw later. Synergizes nicely with anything that needs a copy in any particular zone. Green Men, I could definitely see running this. This almost makes me reminds me of like Echoing Screech from the old Legacy pool. And I almost want to run something that's like Spirit-esque that runs this with like Screech and Green Men and just focuses on getting a lot of copies of the same dude over and over again. Mystic, what do you think of this?
I like this design. It's just good. You get you in your hand. You get one in your deck. The one in deck isn't going to do much. You're likely never going to draw it. It's mostly, do you want a unit in play in your hand and in your graveyard? One interesting thing I want to know about this is it doesn't say friendly unit. So that means you can copy your opponent's big drops, get that in your hand, and then play against them.
Yeah.
So if they play something, for example, Ash, you're playing Ashgurdy, and you're like, I just need one more combustion wand for my deck to kill them. They're within lethal range. You can copy their Ush. You can play their own Ush against them and lethal them with their own Ush.
If you didn't die to their Ush, yes. So yeah, you can definitely use this to turn the tide in a couple interesting battles by copying their finisher if you can play it, if you have the means to do so. I do like that idea a lot. I do also like, of course, the idea of non-native support. Usually what you want to do in the non-native deck is you want to take your units that are already non-native support, your Sketch Times, your Belfry of the Void, and you want to just create a copy of them and then use that to replace the one that's the native copy. And so this helps with that. Hopefully eventually we get more like graveyard support that can let you really maximize on that graveyard effect, but obviously there are certain targets in older formats like Undying Brute where you might be able to just use that effect just natively because they bring themselves back. Empty, what do you think of this?
Oh yeah, I like this design. It's very flexible. I really like that you're able to play it on your opponent's units, and the fact that it's neutral as well. So I could see this being fit into a lot of decks where you just want the like the sort of brave synergy or maybe an extra copy of something, and then you have that added flexibility in certain matchups where you can copy big threats.
Yeah. So the Duskport Chef is a 2-drop Spirit 1/3 Nightling from Swiatlo. With your food costs 1 less and active, create a hearty breakfast. This version of hearty breakfast is actually using the tokens with different art thing we've already established for flames. This is a token with different art version of it that's just give the fed unit +1/+1. And so what does this do altogether? This gives you a steady stream of 0-drop feed +1/+1s. I think this could really, really help a food deck. Or, I mean, just help any old deck that just wants a bunch of fodder in hand, like KM. This gives you a steady stream of stuff. I kind of wish they'd at least, like, just made it, like, pierogies, or made it, like, change the name. I feel like that was a little weird. I mean, we've established the precedent before, but I still think it's a little weird. Or just use the art of the thing that's in the guy's plate. That also could have been more interesting, but despite a couple questionable art choices and directions with the token, I do think this is interesting and makes me want to think about maybe looking into the food deck. Empty, what do you think of this?
Yeah, so food is a very difficult deck to balance because it's usually either completely unplayable or like really ridiculous. But what the deck needs more than anything else is cost reduction effects. Like it just desperately needs those to work. And I think this is a really good replacement for Swing Cook, which the deck used to run. So you could get your food down to 0 cost and play it easily with a bunch of tokens. And I think this will serve the role of Swing Cook even better. Food is still going to need some sort of replacement for like some of the other things it used to run, like Bloodletter, so that it has a way to crack like your hearty eggs. But I think when it gets those, it will be quite strong.
I definitely don't like that this is Spirit. I think this could have been neutral, could have been just fine. A lot of
food is KM. Like,
well, yeah, but I mean, if we want food to not be KM, then we actually need to give it less affinities, not more. Especially because it lets you then just send it as like KM abilities. Mystic, what do you think?
So I really like this design mechanically as a whole. I think it's really cool that food is moving towards a board-based thing instead of just being, I'm going to stock up food in my hand and then just play big units on like turn 7, which is not super interactive. With this, they play and you go, oh, they're a food deck. I need to look at this. I need to think, can I kill them before they get enough food and hit critical mass? Or do I need to kill this and actually get this off the board so they don't have to reduce cost? They're not getting food every turn. And so I think it's cool how it creates this like little dilemma for you. Do you want to deal with this? Because food decks generally, they don't have any early on threats in particular they want to deal with. And then like turn 6, they just come out with 0 mana 11/11s or so with all their food. So I just think it's a good direction for food to take, and it's very strong for food, which they kind of need right now.
Agreed. Okay, let's go back to talking about some quad C designs, people. The Grallax Boxer is a 3-drop neutral 3/1 shapeshifter from Carthian. With summon, gain the tribes of all your units permanently. And then Entomb, if this has a non-shapeshifter tribe, return this to play without a random non-shapeshifter tribe. So this thing can keep on coming back, but it relies on the variety and number of tribes rather than just the being a copy of like what your main tribe is or whatever. And that was actually what the prompt was in MysticSquire. I think you handled it quite handily. Would you like to talk about this card first?
Sure. So I guess I'll talk about the design. So I was thinking, okay, what things can I do that has a bunch of different tribes? Well, normally when you have a bunch of different tribes, that usually means you're going wide. So I'm thinking like Bullock or Heldem even, I guess. Maybe even Ash Skirting. And so you get a bunch of different tribes. And so those are all aggro heroes. You're generally going to be playing an aggro deck. So I figured give this an aggro stat line, give this like, oh, I'm going to keep coming back. You basically get a free unit for each time for each unique tribe you have, which my original ideal was a unit that duplicates itself for each unique tribe. And I'm like, well, that kind of peaks at 5 or 6 units or so. Like,
Yeah.
it kind of gets a little awkward when you have a big board and then this just fills up your board, and that didn't feel good. So instead I compressed it down into a single unit.
Yeah, for those of you who are interested about like the lore implications of this kind of thing, flavorfully, I think it would be really interesting to possibly pursue a subset of the Grallax that care about tribal variety. It does actually make a lot of sense if you know their lore. And it could be cool to have more of these menagerie style decks where kind of like not Highlander, but Highlander, where you're trying to get as much variety in the tribe counts as possible, and then have a couple things that care about tribe count to kind of top it off. Empty, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I think the issue with doing that as an archetype is I think a lot of people aren't going to be a fan of it because people don't really like non-archetype decks. And that's sort of what that fits into. People call them good stuff decks, which I don't think is really the case, but it may cause some issues just in like public perception.
Yeah.
As for this design in particular, I think it's very interesting. I really like the idea of like a multi-tribes matter card, especially with some of the things we've been seeing recently, where the cards have like 3 different tribes, so you could run all of those together in this big like mashup, which would be cool. I think it may be a bit weak since even if you get like a lot of tribes on this thing, it only has 3 attack at the end of the day, so it's not really going to be hitting that hard. And then like if your opponent has any pings, they can pseudo exhaust it since that has to come back into play.
Yeah. Retributer Valkyrie is a 3-drop strength 3/2 angel from Avireg with flying, and when a player plays a card that targets this, play a copy of that card. Ooh, boy, this is fun. So, very interesting sort of variant on the whole removal prevention strategy of not being able to remove this. This is remove at your own risk. And on top of that, this also lets you do sort of a style that I've seen Red do a little bit of in Magic, where, oh, I'm going to take buffs and then hit them with this and then copy them to my other units. Very, very interesting, stylish design. This is only at 3. Why is this only at 3? I don't understand what's going on. I'm so confused. Empty, tell me why this is only at 3.
I don't know why this is only at 3. I completely agree with you. I think this is a really clever design. Really cool dual-sided effect of both protecting itself against removal and being like this double buff target. My only guess would be that people think this is too strong. Personally, I think the balance is about right, but I could see where they're coming from because it is a fairly scary effect. Like you can get a lot of value out of it.
Yeah. I think, and I mean, flavorfully even, it's really, really solid. The only thing maybe I could kind of ask for from it was that line is not relevant to anything that cares about that line. So like, oh, it's an angel from Avireg, which for those who aren't running tribal decks, that doesn't matter, right? It could be a Glorp from Gloop. But like That's the only thing I could see that he could even be perceived as a problem. The rest of it, I think it's super clean, super interesting, fun in multiplayer, fun in single player. I just think the voting populace needs to take a second look at this card, definitely. Mystic, what do you think?
So something that I see as a big issue is this text. What it implies is you can infinitely buff this because you play a card targeting this, it copies that card. You also play that card targeting this. You get another copy. Play the card.
Force play doesn't trigger that though.
Yeah.
Does it?
It
No.
doesn't, but that's not what the text implies, which is an inherent issue for one new player.
So you think people are misreading this and thinking it's busted?
Yes.
Oh,
and
okay.
Well, that's not even misreading. That's just the mechanics of the game engine not doing the same thing as like what is obvious they should be doing.
Yeah.
So I say that this needs a rewording.
Possibly.
I think this needs to actually clarify that this does not infinitely loop, because currently how this is worded is you infinitely buff this and you win on turn 4.
Yeah. I can see what you're saying, because like it does say play on both lines.
Yeah. So Seele, the Crusades hand, is a 5-drop Spirit 2/4 robot Golem Spectre from Mortstall. This was also part of the Quad C. I challenge you to figure out what the challenge was, but I'm going to let you know once I finish reading it. When this leaves the graveyard, draw a card. At the start of the turn, each player chooses 2 of their units and permanently swaps their stats, name, and tribes. And if another unit leaves your grave, add this unit's stats to it. So what this is there was a challenge to create a unit that just had non-keyword effects of other cards already in the game. And I thought this was an interesting take on it. So the middle thing is a little less relevant to the other things, but you could potentially maybe do something interesting with it. I don't know. But beyond that, it's caring about things leaving the graveyard. Another copy. So what is this? This is another copy of, I think, the Bone Dog thing. It's another Belfry at 5. And this is another Storyteller. And for people who are looking to just like mess with people's brains, this is a great combination of stuff to do that with. Because it definitely has a lot of stuff that just messes with people's brains. But as far as how cohesive it was, I'm a little maybe uncertain. Mystic, what do you think of this?
So first of all, what I see from this is what it's doing is that this doesn't swap abilities, or rather the swapping ability doesn't swap abilities. So what you do is you get a 5/5 or something bigger than this. You swap its stats with the 5/5, and now you have a 5/5 Belfry of the Void. Or not Belfry of the Void. Belfry.
Yeah, so you take your biggest unit and make that unit into your new Belfry.
Yeah, and then so basically I would say that's the game plan. And then this is just, yeah, I want to keep raising it back from the graveyard. Just this is like so much value. How could I not want to keep raising that? And in fact, this is actually a snowballing card, because when you raise cards back from the graveyard, you can swap stats with them, making even bigger cards come back from the graveyard. You swap stats with them again, and this keeps snowballing bigger and bigger stats, buffing your board even more and more.
Oh man, I have been so asleep. I can't believe I missed that.
And then you can even just play Grave Rave at the end of all that. Or is this? Yeah, this permanently swaps it. So you play Grave Rave at the end of all that. And now you have an entire board of like 15 units. And then you also draw a card. So to repay for your Grave Rave.
So yeah, really cool Grave Play card. I definitely like it. I've been having a rough week, guys. So I can't believe I didn't miss that combo. That is so fun, and I really like this. I like it a lot, especially now that I can see the strat with it. MD, what do you think?
I may be tired because I missed that as well. I also missed like the gnome could pull more of itself from the deck after you put it on top.
Yeah.
Okay, you explaining the prompt. This card suddenly makes so much more sense.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's the one missing piece you need to click it into place. But I think Cornmeal executed on it wonderfully.
Yeah. So looking at it like in that light, I think the bottom two effects are like very interesting use of that prompt because they like synergize together so well. Uh, I just think the top one could be left off or replaced with something else because it's very inconsequential most of the time,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really play that well with the rest of the design. Uh, the other thing is that the name is too long; it goes off the side of the card. Um, but like other than that, I like the design. I think this is a pretty good execution of that prompt.
Yeah, I just wish more people also thought that way because it's sitting at like 0 for some dang reason.
I mean, if you don't know the prompt, it's a bit awkward to look at.
Or if
Like,
it doesn't,
why
or
is
if the
this
combo doesn't click
legendary?
for you, I guess maybe some people missed that like we did. Adventure calls. This was one of my favorite styles of prompts. I've done 3 of them for those of you who've been following the competition, and they're 3 of the coolest looking designs that have ever been done on the thing. And I'm just gonna toot my own horn on that. Well, because the people who actually picked them up executed on them really well. Adventure Calls is a 0-drop strength legend from Tellura. Once you complete a quest, return this to hand and get +1 EXP. The quests are 3 allies duel, play 2 cards that target an ally, or play a unit with 6 or more attack. And for those of you who don't know, the prompt here was I had these art style prompts where mimic the art of famous artists with very particular styles. And this one was supposed to be inspired by the style of Pendleton Ward from Adventure Time and Greatest Warriors and Midnight Gospel. And I think they executed on it really well. MT, what do you think of this?
Oh, this is a fantastic card. I love this design. I mean, side quests are awesome. And this is a really cool execution of it where it fits into like a bunch of different decks. You can have like a duelist deck with like a bunch of wolves and stuff. You can have your weapons deck or like just a big units deck. I do think the modes it would require some testing, but I don't think the 3 modes are like quite evenly balanced. I think 3 allies duel is a bit harder than the other 2. But man, I love everything else about this. Like the fact that you can transition which quests you want to do, depending on like what you have. Like if you have a bunch of big units, you can switch to that quest after completing your target quest. Such a cool idea.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Mystic, what do you think?
I love this idea. I like modular cards. I think that it's amazing. I do have one concern if this is kind of feast or famine in the sense these all like require certain things to happen. So playing a unit with 6 more attack means you're likely either heralding a lot or like hand buffing, which is kind of like a thing that you don't really get until later in the game. Cards that target allies and the allies duel they require you to have a pretty substantial board. If you do get this, however, this is basically every single card you play, or a lot of cards that you play, maybe 1 or 2 cards you play, this can give you 1 EXP. This can...
Yeah.
I'm concerned that this can be way too good at times since this is... You basically have an extra hero passive at the cost of losing 1 card. And then if you get multiple of these just like, you're gaining 3 XP for playing 1 unit with 6 or more attack. And they can kind of snowball out of control if you have 3 of these and you have enough card draw to actually sustain that. You basically gain 6, maybe even 9 EXP per turn if you build around this properly.
Yeah, I think one of kind of the issues that I'm having with it is that, like, and it has to do with what MP said about a lot of these modes are a little slow, and this doesn't have innate. So, like, how many games is this really going to matter when you have to draw it first? I'm not sure. I don't think a lot is the answer. Like the biggest issue I see with this is that of tempo, where it's like, I don't know if I can get to this card. But if I get to this card, I still have to do some work. And I feel like it should almost cost more in cantrip, honestly. But I love the creativity and the forethought behind this. This just shows that Space is one of those people who is really, really thinking how to push these prompts to their limits.
It doesn't cost any mana.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going down on tempo. You are going down on card advantage.
Yeah.
So maybe you run this in like a high card advantage deck. Like maybe you're running Wax, where you have a bunch of rebound and like card draws.
Oh, and you're definitely going to run in Wax with that second mode, yeah.
Yeah. That also targets things. I do think the dual mode needs a buff, though. That's really hard to pull off.
Yeah, I think it was designed to be like a telescoping thing where it's like 3 allies duel, play 2 cards that share an affinity, and play a unit. But then there's a 6 on there, which breaks the numeric pattern anyway.
The pattern's already broken. Make the dual mode better.
Yeah. So that's just kind of how I feel about it. I really do like it. I really do want it to get in. But Mystic, when he was working on the doc, didn't put the number of votes, so we can't talk about that aspect of the card. We have to move on.
Oh,
no. Johnston Deep is a 2-drop mine 2/2 fish pirate from Osagarth with Unblockable. French vanilla design. The prompt, for those of you who haven't seen it already, was I wanted to see a parody of a popular celebrity in a realm that's just one of the sillier realms. And so we have eel version of Johnny Depp. Mystic, what do you think of this design? Or no, Empty, you go.
What can I really say? It's a 2-mana 2/2 with Unblockable.
Do we need it? I think we need it. I think we need more Unblockable designs.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's on par for the cost.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this could be interesting. One thing I do want to see is the development of a Saboteur Pirates archetype, where pirates are based around dealing combat damage to the opponent. There was a talk with Gokun, who was behind doing all the raid cosmetic updates, about possibly finding a way to keyword this, or the horde cosmetic updates, into keywording this as raid, where whenever you deal combat damage, do something extra, or combat damage to an opponent specifically. And I think that would be really cool, and this could be a really nice, piece in that deck.
Yeah, well, if you're going combat damage, then that could work. The issue is some of the pirates care about just like unit damage in general.
Yeah.
And as soon as you go into that, you have to make cards that are better than Dunewalkers at doing that, which is very difficult, because that is Dunewalker's whole shtick, and they do it very well.
Yeah. But I mean, the other thing this does have going for it is, so it supports Ashgurdy in getting Ashgurdy's passive across. And it could also support really well Lazaro if you want to build Lazaro Fish or Lazaro Pirates. So I hope that can happen one day. As far as Brick, obviously, you're not going to be helping Brick, but you can help the other 2 mine heroes really well. Mystic, what do you think of this?
I think this is a good card in the game in general, just because it's a French vanilla that has a keyword that we basically don't see very often. It gives it a good base stat line of like, oh, I want to add Unblockable to my card. What should its stats be? It's like, okay, now just -1/-1. That basically works for Unblockable. Of course, I will say at the higher mana cost, Unblockable is a bit weird, because a 10/10 Unblockable unit, even for 10 mana, is a lot better than a 2-mana 2/2 Unblockable unit. It might be a bit slow at the higher mana cost, so maybe it could be like a 9-mana 10/10. But I just think this is a good stat line. I think it's healthy. It's good as a just nice aggro tool to get some damage in here and be like, hey, you need answers to my board. Like, I'm an aggro board. Normally you can just block me. but now you actually need to interact with my board. Like, you can't just be like, oh, he's aggro, I'm just gonna play units and let him kill himself while running into me. So.
Oh. Mystic also dropped the ball in filling out the document wrong. Dead Charge Clank is a 3-drop neutral 2/3 undead robot from Mortstall, Realm of the Dead Things, with summon, draw a 3-mana unit, and mill a 2-mana unit. I didn't actually see this one in the sub. This is interesting. Whose turn is it? It is Mystic's turn to go first. Tell me why you picked this card.
So I picked it because I was looking at this. I'm like, okay, it cycles into itself and it mills a unit, and I go, this is really specific. This isn't just draw a unit and mill a unit. It's really specific, which means when things get this specific, you can do interesting stuff with them. For example, you're milling a 2-mana unit. You can mill Vigorous Maw if he's the only 2-mana unit in your deck, which, granted, might make some people not like this card so much. But I find it really interesting. It cycles into itself, but you can also guarantee to basically have 6 copies or twice as much chance to draw a specific 3-mana unit.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, what kind of things can you do with this because of how specific it is?
So yeah, Brute and Vigma are the first two that come to mind.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe Empty. Do you have any creative answers?
No. I'm kind of in the boat MysticSquire talked about of people who don't like the card because of Vigma. To me, this looks too much like someone went, how can we make a tutor for Vigma?
I'm not sure if that's Korn's intent. It might have been. Yeah, I think this kind of design space is just something we got to be really thoughtful about. And this is only really the kind of card that's used if you have a really nefarious idea in mind. One thing, though, is it is a 3-drop that can chain into itself. And I know Korn kind of has a thing for that. He has to chain into himself or themselves. Or he's done at least a couple. And in that respect, it's a pretty good idea if we do more like hand buff robots. Just more, there's a lot of things that could be potentially done with this, but I feel like it's a very, very, it's a scalpel where a lot of cards in collective are multi-tools, where they have to have answers for a bunch of different things, and maybe they're not all great answers, but it's an answer for a bunch of things. This is designed for one very, very specific narrow purpose, and I wish Griff was on here to tell us what that purpose is, because I'm sure he's correct. Okay. Final card for this week. You all excited? Death Drive is a 2-drop strength action from nowhere in particular with force a unit to attack. If it dies this turn, draw 2 cards. Interesting Go-Chris design. Whoa, this is fun. So you can either use this to help push a unit through that players might be encouraged to block normally, or you can use this to bait out an attack from a unit with a valuable passive. You can probably use this to bully the AI. This is definitely one of those cards that has those kind of effects going on with it. Overall, I like it. What do we think about it? MD, I'll let you start.
Oh, I really like it too. It's a really interesting design. Like, it's potentially very powerful if you're in the right situation, where this can basically act as 2-mana removal with card draw. So you have to have your board set up so that you can like block the unit. And on top of that, you can also use this to give one of your units agile. And then if your opponent removes it, you're still even on card advantage because you got 2 cards. Really cool design.
Mystic, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I really like this design as well. It just has it has like some unique things it can do. It brings like some thoughts like, oh, maybe I play this on the opponent unit. They can't block with it anymore, and then I can kill it myself. Or I can play in my own unit, and it kind of goes along with the theme. If the other vampires, if like, oh, we're gonna throw ourselves at the opponent. If we die, we get something back. Like, actually, I'm curious. How does this work with something like the old arts? If you kill a unit, you bring it back the same turn, and you kill it again. Do you draw 4 cards?
I would imagine. Ooh, I really hope that's not how that works. If it dies,
the way it's worded, no.
It says if it dies, not when it dies. So it's not like when it like if it was a when it dies kind of thing, I would believe maybe the other way. Since it only says if it dies, I'm betting it's you can gain at most 2. Yeah, I don't know. This is interesting. I like designs that force a unit to attack, and this is a particularly fun one. So that is the end of the list for this week. I'm going to stop the share. This week was really fun. I am absolutely loving the stuff that people are coming up with for this competition. If you're interested in joining us, you might not be able to win the top 3 prizes, or maybe you can, because bonus points means that any player is basically still in the game to the very end. So come check it out. Read the rules on the Discord. We are pinned in the design competition section. People have come up with some really stellar stuff for this, and it honestly hasn't felt like a competition. This really has felt like a bunch of people having fun and just designing cards in weird, quirky ways that they wouldn't have thought about designing them before. So I definitely recommend checking it out. So sorry Grief wasn't on today. I hope he's doing well. Empty, great having you on as always. Congrats on your spontaneous promotion to co-host. I will try to keep saying that in future episodes. And Mystic, great having you on as a guest, buddy. You always bring a very, it's nice to see someone bring some opinions that are maybe a little less rigid from the competitive standpoint, like Empty and Grief, and a little more kind of in line with mine. So it was great having you on.
Thank you.
Okay, so keep on playing collective. Like, comment, and subscribe to remind me why I'm doing this. Keep on voting on cards, and y'all have a great day. Bye.